What do Canada, Kazakhstan, Congo, and Angola all have in common? They all chart at the top of the world when it comes to population growth. Canada has been on a rapid growth trajectory since 2017, largely due to international immigration. In more recent years, our population growth numbers have surged to 4 times the previous 20-year average, and our growth rate of 3.2% over the past year puts us near the top of the list when it comes to the fastest growing nations in the world. This is as surging demand has driven up rents over 200% since 2015, and as Canada's population enters a population trap for the first time, a unique scenario historically only found in developing nations, where effectively, quality of life starts declining because the population is growing too quickly. So what gives? What's going on with Canada's immigration system, and why is there so much growth happening so fast? Moreover, how did we get to this place, and is it really sustainable? These are questions we're going to be diving into in this video. Immigration and population growth feed into every aspect of society, from housing, where increased demand intersects with a limited pace of supply, all the way through to healthcare, infrastructure, education, and more. I think there's no greater force shaping our nation today than the record-smashing immigration and population growth that we're seeing, which is what prompted the making of this video. I'm a real estate broker by profession. I see the struggle people are going through day in and day out. And I know that this is an issue that we have to get right. So please join me for a deep dive reality check into the story of Canada's ever-accelerating and record-breaking population growth. Canada has always been a nation of immigrants. Unless you come from one of our First Nations in this country, our roots all trace back to migration from around the world. Since Confederation, generally speaking, Canada has always been growing, and immigration has always been at the center of it. For the last few decades, going back to the 1970s, we've had annual immigration numbers averaging roughly 250,000 immigrants per year, with total population growth averaging about 330,000 per year. That's immigration, net natural births, and temporary residents all together. It's been a growth path that has fueled our economy, helped to develop our nation and our cities, and has led to Canada being the country it is today. We owe a lot to our immigrants. But today, that 250,000 immigration number has grown to, well, a lot more. Today, our immigration and population growth levels are far above and beyond any historical precedent set, even during the most active growth periods in Canada's history. As of January 1st, 2024, our population grew by 1.271 million people in just 1 year. This is the most people we've added in a year ever in the history of our nation. Of this growth, 97.6% was from permanent and temporary immigration, and just 2.4% was from a natural increase. That means that we added 1.241 million new immigrants in just the last year, which is 4 to 5 times the running average from the last several decades. When you look at total population growth from all sources, it used to take us 3 to 4 years to add 1 million people to our population. Last year, we added 1.271 million in just 1 year, which is about 4 years worth of growth in 1 year. And this is all StatsCan data, by the way. The last time we even grew by anything over 600,000 was when Newfoundland joined Canada in 1949. We're running at over twice those numbers right now on an annual basis. Just to hammer this home, from Confederation to now, Canada has never, ever grown by these kinds of numbers in the history of our country. So the next logical question is, how did we get here, and why? So why so much growth? It's not like Canada was growing slowly before this. We welcomed lots of immigrants. We were steadily growing. Our cities were growing and building out. Our country was becoming its own. Real estate prices were steadily on the rise. And this was all before we decided to quadruple our growth rate. So let's go back a bit and take a look at just how we got here. When the Liberal government of Justin Trudeau was elected in late 2015, they initially made no plans or policy promises with regards to immigration. In fact, their initial policy document hardly mentions immigration at all. In 2017, the Trudeau government made waves with a landmark announcement that Canada would welcome 1 million immigrants over the next 3 years. The news of this made headlines at home and abroad. Canada will welcome 1 million immigrants in the next 3 years. This was shocking at the time because at 333,000 annually, it was a big increase from the 250,000 immigrants we were used to welcoming before that. And this particular article had a pretty shocking byline, which I'll bring up later on in the video. Nonetheless, this announcement came out of left field and, as I mentioned, was not part of any official policy and did not go before the voters. Despite that, over the next few years, that 333,000 became 400,000 and then 450,000. And fast forward to now, just 7 years later, and we are adding 1.24 million new residents in just 1 year. Not 1 million over 3, 1.25 in 1. That's nearly 4 times the initial number announced, which was headline news at the time. And it's only been 7 years. Though this number includes temporary residents as well, like international students, at the end of the day, it's still population growth. And it's the kind of numbers not dared by any developed nation in decades. So what gives Canada the special powers to be able to absorb this level of population growth successfully? I mean, we have been absorbing it well, right? All right, time to take a look at how we've been doing with accommodating this kind of unprecedented growth. If you're Canadian, buckle up, because this might sting. Canada is a country that provides social services to its people, like healthcare. We also are a country of limited built-up areas and cities for people to live. So if we were doing well on this, we would see affordable housing prices, unchanged wait times for hospitals and doctors, plenty of room in schools, and so forth. But does that sound at all like Canada today? No. In fact, far from it. Rents are skyrocketing. They're up 10.5% in the last year alone and up 21% from just 2 years ago to a national average of $2,193 per month. This is in contrast to average rents in 2015, before Trudeau, which were in the vicinity of $966 a month. That's a 227% increase in under 10 years. And some places like Alberta are seeing 20% year-over-year increases right now. Not good. What about healthcare? Our hospital beds per capita have been falling steadily for years now. Family doctor shortages are being reported all across the country, and wait times for medical procedures have hit an all-time high of 27.7 weeks as of December 2023. Is this a COVID thing? Only partly. Even the director of that study says that ultimately COVID is not the cause. He doesn't say what that cause is, but it isn't a stretch to say that the supply-demand equation is definitely off, like with many other things in Canada right now. What about schools? Municipalities all across the country report shortages for space in schools, many bursting at the seams, trying to put up portables, trying to expand, but they just can't do it quickly enough. We seem to be in a situation where we can all acknowledge these symptoms, right? The fact that these things are taking place, but nobody wants to say it. Nobody wants to point out what, in my opinion, is obvious. Canada is growing way too quickly. We are simply bringing in too many people too quickly. It really is that simple. And this isn't the fault of the immigrants themselves, of course. I mean, my parents immigrated here. Look at me. I have nothing against immigration. It's a matter of policy and leadership. On housing, we're told if we just build a little faster. On healthcare, if we can just add more capacity and just build more hospitals faster. And on education, maybe if we go to hybrid learning and fast track this and that. But maybe it's the case that we're just growing too quickly to reasonably address any of these things. Just in Ontario, we added 552,000 new immigrants, temporary and permanent, in 2023. That's an average of 1,514 new people per day showing up to Pearson Airport to live in Ontario. 1,500 per day. Assuming an average household size of 2.4 people per household, which is our current national average, you would need 631 new housing units each and every calendar day just to house new arrivals in Ontario. That's approximately 2 30-story condo towers worth of people every single day. Just let that sink in. About half of these 1,500 people will end up settling in the GTA, which means just to keep things the same in Toronto, we need to build 1 condo tower per day. And then we wonder why all you see is cranes on top of cranes across the Toronto skyline. And how many of these 1,500 arrivals are kids who need space in school? How many are ill or will get ill and need a doctor? It spills into every aspect of life, and it's happening quicker than we can possibly build and account for. Our current housing completions in Ontario are a little over 73,000 annually, or about 202 per day, far short of where we would need to be. Canada-wide, we complete an average of about 214,000 units per year, which is our running 3-year average. Completing 214,000 houses, but bringing in 1.24 million people, The math is just not mathing. But it doesn't end there. We also have to consider the impact of all of this on inflation. One of the primary causes of inflation is excess demand in society, which drives up prices. The reason that we have high interest rates right now is so that we can lower demand in society. You raise rates, people borrow less, so people buy less, which means lower demand, which leads to lower prices. That's the mechanism at work here. But what happens when you add 1.24 million new people to a population of just 40 million? A massive surge in demand. You have 1.24 million people who, at no fault of their own, will immediately start buying things, renting a place, buying a car, buying goods and services. All of this being a net increase in demand and therefore an impediment to getting inflation back down to target. Some people will say that immigration actually helps inflation because, over the long run, increased supply of labor should lower prices. But I never see those people admit the crucial fact that immigration has a front-loaded demand effect, with disinflationary supply effects only seen in the longer run. The craziest part is that the two biggest increases to immigration numbers were in 2022, when we hit 1 million, and 2023, when we raised that record-breaking million to 1.25 million. For these years, the government knew that we were in an inflation crisis. They knew the goal was to lower demand in society. They had already started that. And yet they proceeded to crank up immigration to record levels and beyond. While we are emptying out of our own buckets to put out this inflation fire, our current government is pouring fuel on the other side of it, making it an even harder task for us to take on. It's an economic truth to say that had we not surged so far past trendline on immigration in 2022 and 2023, we would be further along in our fight against inflation right now. In other words, an inflation crisis was not and is not the time to rapidly increase the population. So who exactly do these policies benefit? They don't benefit the existing population, who has to deal with skyrocketing rents, an insane affordability crisis, and things like longer medical wait times. That much is clear. But they also don't benefit the immigrants themselves. New immigrants today, students, professionals, everyone is subjected to a hyper-competitive environment with out-of-control costs and a landscape that makes it difficult to get ahead. It's incredibly unfair for new Canadians, just as it is for existing Canadians. And unfortunately, it's this set of circumstances that is leading to an increasingly negative viewpoint on immigration among Canadians. If you want people to be able to come here and be accepted warmly, like we used to have for many decades in this country, then you need to make the system work. You need to make it sustainable. You need to make it so that we're all actually better off, not worse. If you can imagine an analogy of an office, a happy office building with a solid company culture, that all of a sudden starts hiring a bunch of new people. If it's a steady pace and the company is buying more computers, setting up more cubicles, expanding the facility, adding a new lunchroom, then you as an employee will look at the growth as something positive. The company's growing, that's awesome. But if they start bringing on 30 new people a week, no new computers, lunchrooms getting crowded, you're starting to have to share desk space, odds are you aren't going to have a very favorable view of the new people. The same goes for our country. If we want existing Canadians and new Canadians to thrive in this country, if we want to grow in a harmonious way, we have to cool down the pace. And we have to make sure that we're buying the cubicles and keeping up with infrastructure and capital investment, which we currently are not. There's just no other way around it. Not doing so, as in continuing the way we are now, hurts everybody, doesn't it? Before we wrap up, I want to talk about this idea of cultural continuity. Canada is a country with an exceptional culture. In fact, although we have beautiful landscapes, rich natural resources, and lovely cities, I would argue that our number one thing that we have going for us, the thing I love most about this country, is our culture. It's not an easy thing to explain, but it's an incredible thing that we've cultivated here, and it's shared by Canadians of all races, colors, and backgrounds. It's what makes Canada, Canada. When you grow too quickly, just like the office analogy, you will, factually, change that culture and perhaps override it. Remember that screenshot from before with the blurred byline? That byline said, in 2017, that the government sees 100% of our population growth coming from immigration by 2036. It was 75% in 2017, meaning a 75-25 split between immigration and natural growth. Last year in 2023, it was 97.6%, with only 2.4% from natural growth. If we are going to be growing 100% immigration-based, what do you think that means for cultural continuity? That isn't at all to say that immigration hurts our culture. It doesn't have to if it's done right, just like growth in an office or organization. But we should ask ourselves, What's the ideal split for our growth between immigration and natural births? Is it 50-50, 70-30, 80-20? Whatever you come up with, I'm fairly certain it would not be 100-0. I can't even fathom why the government would want to aim for this. And if we need more population growth, why not mix in some initiatives to help people have and sustain kids? Our culture is our most precious asset. It's what makes me so proud to be a Canadian. It's what I immediately recognize when I'm abroad and I meet another Canadian, and it's something that we're so lucky to have and experience. And if we keep going down this path of unstable, rapid growth and growing solely through immigration, it just won't last. And that's a travesty. And so that doesn't mean we go to the other extreme and go zero immigration. That would also be a bad thing, bad for our country. We do need immigration. It just means we have to balance things and grow sustainably, growing in line with our ability to build housing and infrastructure, and growing with a healthy mix of both immigration and natural births. That's the reality of the situation. Canada is on a path of unprecedented growth right now, fueled by record levels of immigration. In this video, we went through a deep dive analysis of the immigration numbers, where they used to be, where they are now, and what kind of challenges this growth is bringing. We touched on the fact that in Ontario, we need to build 2 condo towers a day to accommodate the current growth levels, and that nationally, we're doing 4 years worth of growth right now each year. Ultimately, we came to the conclusion that this level of growth is simply too much. This isn't a new idea. It's been proposed by opposition leaders, by economists, and by other finance experts for a while now. But it's largely fallen on deaf ears until only recently, where the feds decided to nudge down the number of international students. And despite being warned, they're continuing with permanent residency increases until 2025. What's clear is that it's time now to restore balance to this country. And the quickest way of doing that is by balancing and moderating our immigration system. We can be smart about our growth. We can resist the urge to jump to extremes. And we can do this in a way that results in everybody being better off. It all starts with recognition from all of us to recognize that this is a problem, to recognize that we can't just build our way out of this despite what the politicians and developers tell us, and that it isn't racist to suggest that the pace is too high when we're running at 4 times our previous national average. The time to recognize this all is now, and my hope is that this video will help us as a country get to that place. This country was built by immigrants, and nothing will take that away. But right now, it's time to moderate. It's time to cool it. It's time we face the reality that is right here in front of us. If you agree with this message, share this video and help get the word out, and be sure to drop your thoughts and comments down below. I thank you for watching until the end. My name is Fahad Rehman in the beautiful city of Toronto, signing off.